The sound of the doorbell echoed through the empty house, sharp and insistent. Emily froze, her hand hovering over the teapot. She wasn't expecting anyone. The rain outside had been falling steadily for hours, a relentless downpour that turned the streets into rivers and the sky into a gray, impenetrable wall. She glanced at the clock, 9:47 p.m. Who would be out in this weather? The doorbell rang again, louder this time, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. She set the teapot down and walked cautiously to the front door, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Through the peephole, she saw a figure hunched under a soaked hoodie, water dripping from the edges. She hesitated, her mind racing through possibilities. Then the figure looked up, and she recognized him instantly. "Jake," she whispered, unlocking the door and pulling it open. "What are you doing here?" Her 20-year-old nephew stood on the porch, shivering and drenched. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like fear, or maybe relief. "Aunt Emily," he said, his voice shaky. "I didn't know where else to go." Emily's instincts kicked in. She grabbed his arm and pulled him inside, shutting the door behind him. "You're freezing," she said, her worry overriding her confusion. "Come on, let's get you dry." She led him to the bathroom, handed him a towel, and rummaged through the linen closet for a change of clothes. Jake stood there, dripping onto the tile floor, his hands trembling as he tried to undo the zipper of his hoodie. Emily stepped in to help, her mind buzzing with questions. What had happened? Why had he come here, of all places? They hadn't seen each other in years, not since he was a teenager. But now wasn't the time to ask. Not yet. Once Jake was dry and dressed in an old sweatshirt and sweatpants that were too big for him, Emily led him to the living room. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and handed him a mug of hot tea. He clutched it tightly, his knuckles white, and stared into the steaming liquid as if it held the answers to everything. "Jake," Emily said gently, sitting down across from him. "What's going on? Why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow sip of the tea, his eyes darting around the room like he was checking for something or someone. Finally, he looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her stomach twist. "I think I'm in trouble," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I didn't know who else to turn to." Emily's heart sank. "What kind of trouble?" Jake hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's complicated. I didn't want to drag you into this, but I didn't have a choice. I need your help." Emily leaned forward, her mind racing. Jake had always been a good kid, smart, kind, a little quiet. But something about the way he was acting now sent a chill down her spine. This wasn't the Jake she remembered. This was someone who had seen too much, someone who was scared. "Okay," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." Jake took a deep breath, his hands tightening around the mug. "It started a few weeks ago. I was working on a project for school, something about environmental sustainability. I thought it was just a regular assignment, but then I found something. Something I wasn't supposed to see." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" "I was researching this company, Green Horizon. They're supposed to be this big eco-friendly corporation, but I found evidence that they're not what they seem. They've been dumping toxic waste into rivers, covering up environmental violations, bribing officials, the whole thing. I thought if I could expose them, it would be huge. But then..." He trailed off, his eyes darting to the window. The rain was still pouring, the sound of it filling the silence. Emily waited, her pulse quickening. "Then what?" she prompted. Jake swallowed hard. "Someone found out. I don't know how, but they did. I started getting these messages, threats, warnings to back off. At first, I thought it was just some prank, but then things got worse. My apartment was broken into. My computer was stolen. And tonight someone followed me. I barely got away." Emily's stomach churned. This wasn't just some teenage drama. This was serious. "Did you go to the police?" Jake shook his head. "I tried, but they didn't take me seriously. They said I didn't have enough evidence. And after what happened tonight, I don't know who to trust. That's why I came here. I didn't know where else to go." Emily reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "You did the right thing. You're safe here. We'll figure this out together." But even as she said the words, A part of her wondered if they were true. Whoever was after Jake wasn't playing around. And if they were willing to go this far to silence him, what would they do to anyone who helped him? The sound of a car engine outside made them both freeze. Emily's eyes snapped to the window, her heart pounding. The headlights cut through the rain, casting long shadows across the room. The car slowed as it passed the house, then stopped. Jake's face went pale. "They found me." Emily stood up, her mind racing. "Stay here. Don't move." She walked to the window and peered through the curtains. The car was parked across the street, its engine idling. She couldn't see the driver, but the tension in the air was palpable. After what felt like an eternity, the car drove off, disappearing into the night. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She turned back to Jake, who was still sitting on the couch, his face etched with fear. "We need to call someone," she said. "Someone who can help." Jake nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "There's someone I can reach out to. A journalist. She's been investigating Green Horizon for years. If anyone can help us, it's her." Emily sat back down, her mind spinning. This wasn't how she'd expected her night to go. But as she looked at Jake, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let anything happen to him. Not now. Not ever. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's make a plan." The rain continued to hammer against the windows as Emily and Jake sat at the kitchen table, a laptop open between them. Jake had pulled up the files he'd managed to save before his computer was stolen. Blurry photos of documents, spreadsheets filled with numbers, and a series of cryptic emails that made Emily's head spin. "This is everything I have," Jake said, his voice low. "It's not much, but it's enough to prove they're lying about their environmental practices. If we can get this to the right people, it could blow the whole thing wide open." Emily scanned the documents, her brow furrowed. "This is huge. But if Green Horizon is as powerful as you say, they're not going to let this go easily. We need to be careful." Jake nodded, his expression grim. "I know. That's why I reached out to Sarah Collins. She's an investigative journalist who's been digging into Green Horizon for years. If anyone can help us, it's her." Emily leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "How do you know you can trust her?" "I don't," Jake admitted. "But she's the only one who's been brave enough to take them on. She's written a few articles exposing their shady practices, but she's never had solid proof. If we give her what we have, she might be able to do something with it." Emily hesitated. She didn't like the idea of involving someone else, especially someone they didn't know. But Jake was right, they needed help. And if this Sarah Collins was as experienced as he said, she might be their best shot. "Okay," Emily said finally. "Let's reach out to her. But we need to be smart about this. No phone calls, no emails. If Green Horizon is monitoring us, we can't risk them intercepting anything." Jake nodded, pulling out a burner phone he'd bought earlier that day. "I've got this. I'll send her a message and arrange a meeting. Somewhere public, somewhere safe." Emily watched as he typed out the message, her stomach twisting with unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were in over their heads. But she also knew they didn't have a choice. If Green Horizon was as dangerous as Jake said, they couldn't just sit back and do nothing. The message sent, Jake set the phone down and looked at Emily. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. I know this isn't what you signed up for." Emily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Your family, Jake. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. We'll get through this together." For the first time since he'd arrived, Jake smiled, a small, grateful smile that made Emily's heart ache. He was just a kid, really. A kid who'd stumbled into something way bigger than himself. And now it was up to her to make sure he got out of it alive. The next morning, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the world outside damp and glistening. Emily woke early, her mind still racing from the events of the night before. She tiptoed past the couch where Jake was sleeping, his face relaxed for the first time since he'd arrived, and made her way to the kitchen. As she brewed a pot of coffee, she tried to piece together everything Jake had told her. Green Horizon was a massive corporation with ties to politicians, law enforcement, and who knew what else. If they were willing to go after Jake, they wouldn't hesitate to come after her too. She needed to be ready. The sound of Jake's phone buzzing on the table made her jump. She glanced at the screen. A message from Sarah Collins. The meeting was set for noon at a crowded cafe downtown. Emily's stomach churned. It was a good location, but it also meant they'd be out in the open, exposed. Jake stirred on the couch, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. "What's going on?" he asked groggily. Sarah replied, Emily said, handing him the phone. "We're meeting her at noon." Jake read the message, his expression tightening. "Okay, let's do this." The cafe was bustling when they arrived, the air filled with the hum of conversation and the clatter of dishes. Emily scanned the room, her nerves on edge. She didn't know what Sarah Collins looked like, but she had a feeling they'd recognize each other when they saw her. Sure enough, a woman in her late 30s with sharp features and a no-nonsense expression waved them over to a corner table. She stood as they approached, her eyes flicking between Jake and Emily with a mix of curiosity and caution. "You must be Jake," she said, extending a hand. "And this is—" "My aunt, Emily," Jake said, shaking her hand. "She's helping me." Sarah nodded, her gaze lingering on Emily for a moment before she gestured for them to sit. "I've been following Green Horizon for years," she said, getting straight to the point. "If you've got something on them, I want to see it." Jake pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. "Everything's on here. Documents, photos, emails. It's not much, but it's enough to prove they're lying." Sarah picked up the flash drive, her expression unreadable. "If this is what you say it is, it could be the break I've been waiting for. But you need to understand, going after Green Horizon is dangerous. They don't play fair." "We know," Emily said, her voice firm. "That's why we came to you. We need someone who knows how to handle this." Sarah studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll take a look at this and see what I can do. But you need to lay low. If Green Horizon finds out you're working with me, they'll come after you harder than ever." Jake and Emily exchanged a glance. They'd already figured as much, but hearing it from someone like Sarah made it feel all too real. As they left the cafe, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She scanned the street, her eyes darting over the faces of strangers, but no one seemed out of place. Still, the unease lingered, a heavy weight in her chest. "What now?" Jake asked as they climbed into the car. "Now we wait," Emily said, starting the engine. "And we hope Sarah can do something with what we gave her." But deep down, she knew it wasn't going to be that simple. Green Horizon wasn't just going to sit back and let their secrets be exposed. They were going to fight back. And when they did, Emily and Jake needed to be ready.